World History, Chapter 3, Ancient India and China. In what ways did the civilizations and empires of ancient India and ancient China lay long-lasting social and political foundations? That's a mouthful, so basically what it's saying is, how did these early civs create something that's going to impact the way things are done or the way things are viewed today? And so that's one of the things to kind of keep in mind. So that's really the essential question here. How is the past shaping India and China today? And we'll look at that a little bit later on with the last assignment that we do. So section 1, early civs of India and Pakistan. How have we learned about India's first two civilizations, the Indus and the Aryan? So first of all, we're going to look at the geography like usual. We'll look at some of the clues that have been left behind to help us understand the rise and the fall, or at least make guesses about the rise and the fall. We'll look at some of the major characteristics of these civilizations, and then we'll explain what ancient India epics reveal about Aryan life and the way things are done. So first of all, when we look at the geography, one of the things to kind of keep in mind is when you look at the Indian subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh are 3 of the top 10 most populous countries in the world. India is number 2 with 1.3 billion people, so they're not very far behind China in terms of number of people. Pakistan is number 5 with 197 million, and Bangladesh is 8. To put it in perspective, the U.S. is number 3 with 325 million. So we have about the same as Pakistan and Bangladesh put together, but we are far behind India. So one of the things about this, we're going to talk about the impact of geography. Because of these mountains, you have the Hindu Kush mountains, and then you've also got the Himalaya mountains. What that does is that is going to cut India off. Now, it's not going to be totally isolated, but that does allow it to develop a pretty distinct culture. When we look at India, it's this kite shape. And so when we look at it, most of the people live along these fertile plains, just on the other side of the mountains where the river valleys are. So this is known as the Gangetic Plain, where the Ganges, Brahmaputra come in, but also that goes over to the Indus as well. When we look at the Deccan, which was the interior part of that kite, this is what it looks like. It's pretty barren, pretty desolate, pretty arid, very little population. Now the other part is along the coast, the coastal plains, also known as the Eastern and Western Ghats. And what you can see from this picture is you can see that this is very fertile. And so lots of people live on the Gangetic Plain and then also on the coastal regions of India. And the other thing is with this Deccan Plateau, which is in the middle part, it's going to isolate the southern part of India. So they're going to develop a distinct culture and language as well. When we look at the other piece of the puzzle here, these monsoons, these seasonal winds are going to have a big impact on climate. So if you get to the test, the thing to be looking for and the thing to kind of keep in your mind is if the winds are coming across the Himalaya mountains, what they're going to be doing is they're going to be picking up dry air. And that dry air is going to push across India, and it's going to push all of the moisture from the oceans out. Now on the flip side, when you get to the summer monsoons, the winds shift and they change and they come across the Arabian Sea, and what they're going to do is they're going to pick up this moisture and they're going to bring it into India, and that's going to be the rainy season. So summer is rainy season, winter is the dry season. And again, if you just kind of look at what is the wind coming across, is it coming across water? Then it's going to be rainy season. It's coming across the mountains, it's going to be the dry season. So what have we learned about these? Because we don't know much about them. It wasn't really until the 1900s that someone had stumbled across these cities. As a matter of fact, Great Britain is building a railroad in India, and they happen to come across these ancient ruins, and they start to excavate it, and then they start digging and finding more of these cities. So there's very little written evidence. But what we did learn is from the cities. The 2 twin capitals appear to be Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. They're hundreds of miles apart, but they seem to be identical in layout. Their main big streets run north and south. Their smaller avenues run east and west. They are designed the same. They are structured the same. They have great baths, granaries of almost identical size and shape and build and location. They have these well planned out sewer systems. And so what that tells us is these ancient Indus people must have had a pretty strong organized government to be able to pull off these two twin capitals hundreds of miles apart that are almost identical to each other. The other thing that we find out is that they are making a living by farming and trading. And we do know, because we found these clay seals as far away as Sumer, that this Indus Valley civilization is trading with the Sumerians. And so we know that. We also know from the finding of things that they had a system of weights and measurements, which is shown there. And we also look at their religious beliefs. We know that they're polytheistic. The other thing is we can kind of make a guess based on these clay seals that cattle are important to them. And we see that in India today that there's this veneration of cattle even to this day. So we can kind of guess that those early religious beliefs are going to impact the way people view things today. So the decline. What we see is the pottery starts to decline towards the end of the Indus city. We also see writing disappears and cities begin to disappear. And so over a course of a number of years, we see that this Indus civilization is kind of eroding. Best guess is that there's a couple of things that are going to come together. There's some man-made that maybe they overused some of their surroundings and some of their resources. But the other thing is there seems to be pretty good evidence that there was some kind of a natural disaster where the river shifted. The Indus River shifted about 50 miles from where it is currently. So that would cause some pretty big problems. Irregardless, what ends up happening is because of these man-made and natural disasters, they're left kind of in a weakened state and they're very vulnerable to attack. And that opens the door for the Aryans. The Aryans come in from this Caucasus region. They cross through the Hindu Kush Mountains and into India. And what you're going to see is the Aryans and the leftover of these Indus people are going to blend their cultures. So this acculturation, blending of different cultures. And we learn from the Vedas, these hymns and these chants, these rituals and religious teachings that were originally passed down by word of mouth. And over centuries, you kind of continue to add, and eventually these Vedas are written down, and they tell us what the people of the Aryans believed and they valued. And from there, what we find is that the Aryans had this nomadic lifestyle. They adopted farming from the Indus people. And from these Vedas, we know that the Aryans had this very structured society. You have the Brahmins, the priests, the academics. You have the Kshitras, the warriors and kings, policemen, army members, the Vaishyas, which are the business community, and then the Kshudras, which would be the servants and the peasants and those. And then they also have the Dalit, the untouchables, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. The Aryans are polytheistic. But it's kind of interesting because they believe in this Brahman, this single spiritual power. And what they believe is all of these other gods are representations of Brahman. And so Brahman is able to kind of portray himself in many different ways. And that's what all of these different gods and goddesses are doing. And what they believe is this Brahman is this universal spirit that is in all things. So a couple of other things that help us learn about Aryan life, these epic literatures, the Mahabharata talks about warfare and that's going on in here, but it also talks about duties and the immortality of the soul and how important it is for us to put away our selfish desires and to follow the duty of our caste, the duty of our calling. And so that's really a way to teach the people of ancient India what it is that society values. And you see this Ramana, if I said that right, but this is the story of this king whose wife is stolen. He works with this general, this monkey general, to return her. And throughout this epic poetry, what we find is that the ancient Indus people and Aryan people admire virtue and loyalty and obedience. And these stories are a way to teach young children what ancient India wants them to be able to do and become when they grow up, and how they're supposed to act and what they're supposed to be like.